So I'm pretty excited about today. We got a good case study to go through, and what I'm excited about is when I spoke to Peter Foldis today, who was explaining to me about this particular prospective client who's now a client of his. It was really exciting to see how he really utilized much of the six-step sales process. And I'm going to let him talk about this particular case that he did with a lady named Ginger. And I will, while he's given the background on the case, I will bring up first the fact finder, and then I will bring up the roadmap as well, so we can see the whole thing from start to finish. But Peter, if you could talk about the onset of the case, the intro from Jack, the whole thing, and I'm going to look at the fact finder while you're starting.
All right, perfect. Um, excuse my voice, everybody. I had a long week. I lost a little bit of it, so I'll do my best here. But ultimately, I met with Ginger and went through her fact finder. Of course, took the first 15 or 20 minutes of our meeting to kind of go backwards in a sense and just kind of get to know her a little bit. And what we focused on was understanding where she's been, where she's at, and where she wants to go. And what I learned in that process is really her pain points, understanding that she had worked at the rail system for the last 30 years. When I first spoke to her, it was in December, and she was preparing to retire the first of March, first week of March, and so she was looking for some insight and clarity on what options she might have. She had been contributing to this 401k for a long time, but hadn't contributed to it in some amount of years. And overall, she expressed to me that she, wanted to get into some entrepreneurial. She's only 59. She's turning 60 in a couple of weeks. So she was only 59, but just past 59 and a half. And she explained that she had devoted her last 30 years to the rail, and now she wanted an opportunity to maybe do some of the entrepreneurial dreams that she had. She's also single, never married, no kids, but she was taking care of her elderly mother. So one of the things I learned was that she had a brother and sister that probably wouldn't be taking care of her mom or helping in that regard. And also that she didn't want to end up like her mom, in a position where she needed somebody else to take care of her. So um, she wasn't all that thrilled with the way that her 401k had been growing, which is why she stopped contributing to it. Um, and she knew that she was going to end up having a shortfall with her pension. So her income during work was 70,000 a year, and her pension was only going to be 3,600 a month. So there was going to be a bit of a shortfall there, and she wanted to understand what options, like I said before, she'd have to overcome that shortfall. Um, so I learned that she wanted to go scuba diving, that basically she's hoping to do at least a trip, if not two a year. And so that really helped me have a better understanding of how we could help position her retirement spending to meet her minimum monthly needs and still budget for a couple of trips a year. So in
So
doing
if
that,
I could, Peter, if you don't mind me jumping in a little bit,
of course.
I hope it's okay. Um, so what I wanted to share with everybody is you can see the fact finder that Jack Murphy did for Peter, and I'm showing it on the screen. And it shows, some things that she wants to enjoy. She wants scuba diving a few more times. She said she would eventually move after her mom passed. Peter established a lot of rapport with this lady about, she was taking care of her mom. Um, Travel she wants to do, and she would like to visit Ireland, and scuba diving, and her mom was a pain point. The reason I bring this up is this is step one, where we spent so much time talking about step one of connecting. So not only did Jack, the concierge of Peter, do a really good job of, and Jack just has to ask the questions and take good notes, but Jack did a really nice job of gathering all this specific information on this person. But then Peter, this is the key. When all that information is taken, if Peter comes in to the equation and he disregards all the stuff that Jack learned, all the pain points, all the concerns that this woman had, it's like it's such a foolish thing to do. So commending Jack on finding out all those things, and I'm commending Peter on Peter, you told me this morning. How much time did you spend initially talking to her about all the things that Jack said and kind of the what else's? How much time did you spend at the beginning of the meeting, what I'll call connecting?
Easily 15, probably more like 20 minutes.
Okay. So, one of the things that we always talk about is building trust. And I just, want to just hammer home the point here that Peter helped to build trust for this case because he continued the fact finding and re-emphasized all the things that mattered to this lady. So again, 15, 20 minutes building a relationship, because as we all know, if they don't trust you, they're not doing any business. How do you build trust? You listen, you show that you're listening, and you show that you care about addressing the things that matter to that client. All right. So I just want to drive that home about step one. Thank you, Peter. Go ahead.
Absolutely. So you can see that she has, doesn't really have any thoughts on life insurance. Of course, like I said, not having any spouse or kids, a death benefit, traditional idea that people have of what life insurance can do. That wasn't really a high priority in her mind, but she did have a high emphasis on what happens if I get sick and I need something like the long-term care. But really her biggest pain points were knowing that she was going to have an income shortfall and what she could do with her $500,000 in the 401k to best help her. So after that opportunity to build rapport and learn a little bit more about her, what I basically explained was, hey, listen, I have some basic information that Jack was able to get, was able to learn from you, but it's really important for me to know you as a person, know what's important to you, know what it is you value, and really know how I can best serve you. And so I give her an opportunity to really share with me what she wanted to accomplish on the meeting with us and how I could make that hour-long slot most valuable for her. And so during that time, she really was able, that's really like the opening statement for me is like, hey, how can I make this the most valuable time for you? And it basically allowed 5 to 8 of those first minutes to be where she just kind of narrated what exactly she wanted to do and how she wanted to do it. I didn't have to ask too many questions, just listen during that time. The longer I listened without interrupting her or adding feedback, she just kept going. That's typically what I find with folks when they kind of get nervous about there being silence. They just keep talking. So if you want to go to the roadmap, I think I'm done with the fact finder.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go there now.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, because first off, we're doing this by Zoom. And, it's not unusual for me to say to people, I was blessed with 2 ears and 1 mouth.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm here to listen to you. And really, I enjoy doing this work because of the relationships that I've developed over the last 41 years.
Yeah.
Now, everything you said, I agree with. But I also want to say that when we get down to the fact finder that, the concierge did, I find that an opportunity to reinitiate connecting with them, because I tell them we're not just doing the fact finder, we're auditing it.
Mm-hmm.
And that extra information there, they start telling me, "Oh, that's 475, but it was 550 before the crash."
Yeah.
And then I say, "Well, who are you talking to?" And with a 401k, they may not be talking to a soul.
Yeah.
They're doing it all on their own. But if they've got a Edward Jones guy or whatever company, there are opportunities there to get them to say they don't like what they're doing.
Of course. Yep.
And make good notes on it. That's something you can come back to.
Yeah, that was part of the conversation. She, like I said, she let me know that she hadn't been contributing to the 401k for quite some time because she didn't like how it was performing. We come to, towards the end, I'll share more, but we come to learn a little bit more about her profile inside that 401k after she committed to moving forward. But Of course, I started the roadmap when we transitioned by showing the Tom Hegna video. In that video, he talks, of course, we know about the just in case retirement. And although she doesn't have kids to relate to Tom's, verbiage that he talks about letting the kids spend it, letting the kids spend it, I was able to say, hey, well, if you don't spend it, where's it going to go? And ultimately it's going to go to her brother and her sister. Okay, well, would you rather you spend it and go on your vacations and enjoy your scuba diving and do these things that you shared you want to do, or do you want it to go to your brother and sister? Um, so as we progressed, of course, I got those answers, and of course, they were answers like, "Yeah, I'd rather spend it than give it to my brother and sister."
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we then talked about the tax chart, talked about essentially where taxes are now, and the debt chart. Talked about back when she started her 401k 30 years ago, why it certainly had been a prevalent use uh, of planning and what the benefits were back in 78 when their taxes were so high, and that if those plans were introduced, give a little bit of history about why it made sense for people to defer their income at that time, and then asked her, exactly what it made, based on our current debt, there's one of three things that can happen with taxes. You're going to really think I'm really smart right now. I'm going to blow you away here. You ready? It can go up, it can go down, or it can stay the same. What do you think it can do? And she's the one that said, I think I'll probably go up, but I don't really know. And then I had the opportunity to explain to her no matter what, if nothing changes, and of course, Congress is good at doing nothing, so who knows? But if they do nothing, we know the taxes are going to go up in about a year and a half, 2 years. So that being said, um, if we didn't take in consideration the increase in debt and just based off of that, those taxes reverting back as she goes into retirement and she's now 3 years in, what would that look like for her? Another question we talked about was, God forbid something happened like it happened in 2008, where people lost up to 55% of their portfolios. How would that make you feel about your 500,000? Instead of having 500,000, you have 225,000. How would that work for you? Would that make you feel like you have another 20 years ahead of being financially secure? Of course, she said no. So I had the opportunity to get her to ask questions where she was answering them, and just sharing with me what she thought, and agreeing with her, and edifying, what she thought. As we went through the sequence of returns, that wasn't a term that she understood. So we discussed why the last 30 years, the sequence of returns while she was contributing didn't really matter. While basically her account was on autopilot doing what it did. And there wasn't really anything to worry about when it came to sequence of returns, helping and showing her how side A versus side B, overall the rate of return is the same, or the earning rate was the same, and the outcomes were the same. And then we went into the distribution time. So that's when I also had an opportunity to reiterate and go back and say, okay, well, the way everything is now, based on sequence of returns and understanding how that works, if again your retirement account dropped suddenly because of a COVID event, because of a 2008 real estate event, or some other worldwide wars, which at this time all the wars were piping up and getting hot around the world, things out of our control, how would that affect her in her retirement? So she seemed to really grasp these concepts, and that's when we introduced the volatility buffer and talked to her about basically now diversifying the way her portfolio is set up and giving her an opportunity to have some growth and some security inserted into her process, knowing that in a down year, instead of losing money and having to make up time horizon, which she doesn't really have, like a person in my age group would have, what that might look like for her, going through the next 5, 10, 25 years of her retirement, and what that could do to her achieving her dreams and her goals in terms of travel, in terms of being able to replace her car, fix her house, all these types of things that she mentioned might be things that she could anticipate doing in the future. So
So,
then,
Peter, again, I just want to interact a
sure.
little bit and bring up some things that you may or may not realize you're doing well. As he's describing this, I think it's really important to emphasize that he's not just going through these charts and graphs and things and like not thinking about the lady, not thinking about Ginger. He's incorporating things about what she said. He's involving her in the discussion. Like Ed said, 2 ears, 1 mouth. Sometimes what we all do is we just talk, and because we don't master the information, because we don't have such a, we haven't mastered it and such confidence in what we're going to communicate. We just talk a lot, and we don't pay attention to the cues and the signs. And he made it Peter's clearly making it a conversation and bringing things in. And I just want to commend you on that, Peter.
Thank you. Yeah, I find that just as like a self-regulation point is that when I'm in any meeting with any client, if I find that I'm need water, I'm probably talking too much. So just as a point of kind of like what that looks like and what that feels like, I certainly like to get the person talking as much as possible and make them feel like they're leading the conversation and reminding them the things they told me. I found that to be very effective. So this is where we started discussing her actual finances. Prior to going in this, I know that there's another page here below where it reassesses her, the next page actually, where it shows all of her actual assets, and we kind of go over what it is that Jack found. But I did that kind of verbally as we looked into what her initial roadmap was. So I had a conversation with her, and I was looking at the fact finder saying, okay, this is what we have. This is where we're at. Does that all sound right? And then I went to this page that says Ginger Gwynn, 4750 retirement budget, 2,000 assets. So I had a short conversation with her about that to be able to set the stage for what we were going to talk about next. She does live in Texas, so that's why you see 0% state taxes. And then right here, you see where her assets were. So essentially, she only had $2,000 in savings, a little bit in a checking account, but her real asset was her 401k. That's where she had all of her money. So as we looked at her retirement, you can see on this page her income. The payroll ends in 2024. So like I mentioned before, she's retiring in 2 weeks at this point. And with her rail system, they don't have Social Security. They have a pension system instead. So the only income that she could be guaranteed of is this $3,600. And as I'm looking at it now, the start year should actually be 2024. But overall, that's what her guaranteed income was. And then her goals on a minimum basis were the 4,750. So the 4,000 monthly, and then another 750 starting in about a year or two. So there was a little bit of clarity that we needed to get on kind of her timeline and her horizon, because initially she wasn't quite sure if it was going to be March, or she was a little wishy-washy when she was talking about when she might retire. But we got to this page, and of course, 75%, give or take. I don't remember exactly what my conversation was this time, but hey, I know in school these grades teachers give us, I didn't always necessarily always the best student growing up, but I know that 75 was just kind of average. Knowing that your outlook for retirement based on 1,000 Monte Carlo simulations, and this is prior to this, I actually explained what it is that the software does and what we were going to talk about. And so I went and I explained what Monte Carlos were. I live in Las Vegas, so I got to talk about how the casinos use these to make sure they always win. Nassau uses these to make sure that they have the most accurate opportunity to predict the success of their rocket ships landing. The FDA uses these to approve drugs. So overall, they're heavily relied upon systems and calculations to be able to create a predictive index of what could happen based on these simulations, something she had never heard of before. And so then I said, now, based on everything we talked about, if you continue the way that you are, you've done a great job of saving and preparing for retirement. You have $500,000. That's so much better than most people, or a lot of people that I get to talk to. So I commend you on doing that. Based on the way you want to live, when I run the Monte Carlo simulations, taking this out to the average lifespan that we can predict a person in your age group may have, you have a 75% chance of being able to make it through retirement and live within those means. How does that make you feel? And I remember this very clearly. She said, well, that sounds like a dumb question. And I said, well, certainly not trying to insult your intelligence. That's not my intention. But overall, The only way I can know the answer to that is by asking you. So knowing that right now, the way that it is, if you could do something to change that score and to improve it, would you want to? And she said, yes. I said, okay, well, these are the steps that I took to look at to doing that. And so then we talked about being able to move roughly $300,000 out of her 401k into the volatility buffer. You can see the numbers that I used was a par of 80%. I said, listen, this is a conservative estimate. Right now, par participation rates are actually quite a bit higher. And typically that's, but basically what I've done here is shown you on a conservative level at 80% what you could expect. I'd rather be conservative and over deliver than show you today what it looks like as if that's not going to change in the next 10 years. So based off of that, with these numbers, being able to also put in a Roth conversion over a period of time, and of course I talked about that, just not changing what you're doing, not changing what you have, not reinvesting into the market or doing anything crazy, just massaging the way everything is allocated and moving a little bit from the right pocket to the left pocket. This is what you could look forward to. And that's when I was able to show her, just by making these changes, we're able to take you from a 75% chance to a 94% chance of success to live the retirement of your dreams. How does that make you feel? And again, vividly, I can remember her saying, makes me feel like I should do something, right? I should do something. And I, from there, said, okay, well, amazing. Based off of everything that we've talked about, what do you think the next best steps are? And she said, well, I'm not really sure I'm going to retire right away. I want to retire in March. I got to look into a few things. I said, okay, I totally get it. Now, you did tell me you haven't been contributing to this policy in quite a few, your 401k in quite a few years, right? She said, yeah. I said, so we could wait. If you waited, whether that was 4 months or 6 months or a year or longer, what would the benefits be to that? And she didn't really have a whole lot to say. Well, I don't know. I just kind of keep doing what I'm doing. Maybe the market loses like it has been. And so what would the drawbacks be? She said, well, I guess I'd stay at a 75% instead of going to a 94%. Okay. Well, knowing that you can go to a 94% and we can do that for you now, if you could do it now, would you want to do it? And she said, yes. And then that was it. We set up the next appointment. I told her what the next steps would be, how it would work, what the process was for submitting an application, what the process was for moving the money, and we got the ball rolling.
Beautiful. I see that there's a question that came in. Let me see. How do you do Roth conversions for the client? How do we calculate how much money? Because we might not know the client's marginal tax. Don't we just ask them to work with their CPA?
Well,
go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, as far as the Roth conversions go, what I let her know is this was just an estimate. Everything that we talked about today can be changed and modified based on current needs and future prospect. So if you think, hey, I'm going to need some money for X, Y, and Z, she mentioned wanting to pay off her car, which is like an $8,000 balance. She mentioned wanting to do a couple of different things. So from there, ultimately, I just said, listen, this isn't anything set in stone. This is a projection and an estimate and one way that we can go about massaging these numbers for you. Really what it's going to boil down to is looking at what on a year-to-year basis those thresholds are. So she knew that in 2023, as an example, we weren't going to do a conversion, but we also knew that it's starting in 2024 when her income dropped to $3,600 a month, that her income was going to be a lot less, and that would provide an opportunity to do a conversion. And what I positioned was that we would never do a conversion that's going to take her to the next tax threshold than where she's at now. So if that meant basically converting the difference of 3,600 times 12, so essentially the difference between her current income of 70,000 and projected income of 42,000, a $28,000 conversion would give her the exact same tax bracket that she's currently in. So I wouldn't have to really go above and beyond that. And then from there, if she wanted to go a little bit deeper and convert a little bit more sooner, the tax rate wouldn't really change that much from 70 to 80, or we're still being the same tax percentage. So I said, basically, when it comes time to do these conversions, we're going to actually take a step back from everything we've talked about, and we're going to zero in on exactly what the right number is for you and what makes the most sense according to what your tax obligations or what your ability is to pay your tax obligations are on a given year. And that's how I handled that.
Excellent. Mark Valentich said, well done, Peter. Very smooth, welcoming process. I definitely
Thank you.
see, yeah. And I see why, Peter has a very good closing ratio. And I think it's clear that, he's very personable with the client. He really is gaining from them what's important to them and having a conversation. He's not pushy and he's not selling hard. And I have to say, I feel flattered that he really follows the process that we created. A lot of the words and language that he uses are from the videos and things like that. So I would just encourage everybody to consider, following, because it is working quite nicely. And Peter, that was a nice 300,000. And by the way, there was a $300,000 volatility buffer.
Ended up closing at 323.
Okay.
When we went into the 401k, there was around 200,000 that was in company stock. So we left that in there. It was Berkshire Hathaway company stock. So rather than liquidating that, we went through, that process too. But real quick, I do have to hop off, but I want to speak to what you just said, Erik. When I was preparing, in this process, and the reason why I feel aligned with what's going on and comfortable in the process is exactly what Erik just said. I watched all those training videos multiple times, the 6 steps that Erik basically is on the website doing the training, and really looked at the verbiage and the language and the examples that he provided. And I used those examples and have also wrinkled in some of my own verbiage to personalize it. But to me, it's really telling a story. And the story every time becomes customized, like he said, like Erik said, based on their needs and what they said they wanted. So I don't feel like I'm ever selling them anything. I'm simply telling them back their own story. And I've wrinkled in some tools and some pointers as to how this whole thing works. And at the end of the day, it's really all about them. So, I just like to reiterate to them, listen, at the end of the day, this is really your program. How do you want to position it? Where do you want your slices of the pie to be? And what do you want to eat at the end of the day? So I do encourage you to read or to listen to those videos, because for me, it really helped. One thing that I do when I read those things is I actually go through the process of writing down everything. So it takes some pausing and stopping, but I will write down every sentence that Erik said on a page, and then I'll practice it, and then I'll watch it, and then now it becomes something that I just know what I need to do when, and I don't have to think about, oh, I'm at this page. It's just simply a flow. It's like back in school when you were learning about, plot and subjects and summaries and all this kind of stuff. It really just is a process that does the work for you. So if you're getting these fact finders, or you're getting these clients and they're IFW clients who've gone through workshops and webinars learning about their retirement score, and you're not actually utilizing the software and telling the story with them, not only are you doing yourself a disservice as an agent, but more importantly, you're robbing these people of the information they're seeking. So to do that would be a shame, in my opinion. So certainly go back and do that and hone those skills. And I wish you all the best of luck. I got a 2:30 Pacific call, so I got a jam.
Thank you, Peter.
You're welcome. I see a question about getting more help or anything like that. Jack, if you want to put my info in there, I'm happy to talk to anybody. You guys can text me, hit me up, email me, whatever works for you, and I'd be happy to help.
That's
Gotcha.
awesome.
I'll put it in there now.
All right, guys,
Thanks.
take it easy.
Thank you, Peter.
You got it.
So, certainly a really good example of just following the process, having empathy for where the client's coming from, and I thought that was wonderful. So there's another.
Can I add to that a second?
Yeah, go ahead, Peter. I mean, Ed.
Yeah, I
Ed.
mean, he took the score from 74 up 20%.
Mm-hmm.
And in the right on the list it says it's sharing their excitement.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's pretty important right there for me. I mean, I ask you all to consider this statement. I say, look, your money is in the Wall Street casino. We just took, in his case, a great percentage, 60%, and made it bulletproof. How does this feel? You just improved your score 20%. But if you've already won the game for the goals you have, why are you still playing?
That's
Let's
right.
take assurance over risk. What's your opinion?
Yep, that's great. That's a great line, Ed. I think that's great. Perfect segue into Ed. I've got to tell you, Ed, how long has it been since we've been working together?
Uh,
Is it a year and a half or 2 years? It's one of the two.
no. Uh, oh, 16 months.
Okay. So sorry about the being 2 months off there.
Well, I'm such a pain. You think it's 2 years.
But anyway, I want to tell Ed closed like 400,000 last week. And I want to tell a quick story. When Ed when I was first introduced to Ed, and Ed had been exposed to like all these leads programs. And he was so skeptical, and his business partner was on the phone. They were grilling me and all these things. And at the end of the day, 16 months later, Ed has closed a real great amount of business, really embraced the process. But he also, I think I speak for you, Ed was not technology savvy, meaning that he wasn't doing business virtually. He was trying to figure it all out. And I think we did a good job helping him. And the reason I bring it up is, Ed, you're doing business all over the country. There's a lot of people that sometimes when we talk to people, they're like, say things like, can you get the leads in my local area? And by the way, I'm not saying that that's not a good idea and that we're not exploring that. But the point is that, Ed's doing business all over the country virtually, and he was struggling to find a really good system. So Ed, if you could just share a little bit about these recent cases that you've closed, and maybe a little bit too about your journey and anything that you think could help the team.
Well, I did 3 cases last week, and 2 the week before. And they're not all IFW leads. 3 of them are.
Mm-hmm.
Lady in Maryland, a principal of a high school in Wichita, Kansas,
And where are you located, Ed, so everybody knows?
about 30 miles west of Denver in the mountains.
Yep.
And so I don't even see a city months at a time. And then the other guy was in Landers, Wyoming. Now, the guy in Landers, Wyoming, I think this is really important to everyone here. I got the fact finder on him in early summer of 23.
Wow.
And, another one that I sold recently named Sam in Philadelphia. Well, that's not true. He's in New Jersey, actually, right across from Philly. And I got his lead in June last year. And when you put those all together, it was about 1.3 million.
Jesus.
But also the work I'm doing on the leads, if you could get Jack just to stay around instead of skiing in Europe all the time. But I mean, the work I'm doing on the leads has a great effect on my own leads. And I've always been a guy that gathered lots of referrals. And so I'm using the techniques of IFW and sometimes the roadmap to close my own leads, which are generated from my 20,000 customer base. Okay, so
Awesome.
the thing of it is, though, that I can't emphasize enough, is when you get a fact finder and you talk to somebody, the first stage, we're getting rapport, but there's a whole new envelope of rapport that's available by editing or auditing the fact finder. You can turn that into, I had 500,000, now it's 4. I could turn that into, I don't trust my guy at Charles Schwab anymore. But I mean, you don't say that to them, but they'll get that out on the table. And then, you know, you guys are all pros. You ladies are all pros. Look, I'm here to protect you. And I empathize with your experience. Tell me how I can help. My God, they just turned on a tape recording of everything they've been thinking. So I'll shush there, you know, other than, gee, it's nice. Jack's back from the mountains in Switzerland. Okay.
Ed, that's amazing. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Anybody, let me see if there's any questions. Wow.
Oh, I want to continue just 1 second. Two of those sales I mentioned, I got the husband. And these are the people back from May and June. And lined up is now the spouse on
Gotcha.
both of them. So it's, you know, it's guys, we've all, or everyone here, not guys, we've all heard of funnels. Erik invented a funnel. Okay.
Thank you. All right. So one of the questions from Dan Rodder is, most of my leads are women, 85%. What are others experiencing? All the guys are already passed away, Dan. So you're, you know, we do get a lot of females, and I think females are great. There is a lot of research that says they're ultimately the decision makers. You know, even when there's a man involved, but we do get a lot of women, obviously evidenced by your 85%.
Don't forget too, when you have women, I mean, I'll shut up, guys, but when you have women, you probably have a client or two that would say it's okay to get a call to check you out.
Mm-hmm.
Women love that. I mean, if you're meeting a lady in Baltimore and she can call one of your clients in Denver or Florida and check you out, wow, it's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Maggie says, we don't have an in-person meeting yet. How to reduce no-show? I guess you're saying, how do you reduce no-shows? So I'll let anybody answer that, but what I'll say is a lot of reasons to communicate lightly. And just like, for example, one such thing, the system sends automatic reminders and stuff, but one of the things that we always like to do is send the text message that says, hey, this is Maggie. We have a meeting later today to talk about your retirement score. Just wanted you to know the phone number. This is the phone number that I'll be calling you from, so you're not surprised. So that's like a nice little touch, you know, that you might find helpful. But other than that, you know, Maggie, there's always going to be a no-show rate on the first meetings. That's why some people like the concierge, despite the fact that there's some people that love to do the first meeting themselves. So everybody has their own style and preference. But one of the things that factually is your no-show rate after the fact finder's done is like 85% show up rate, right? So, you know, Jack and Courtney and Rachel, they experience more no-shows than the advisors that are getting the fact finders from them. So I hope that helps a little bit. There's a lot of AI assistance. So what I thought maybe I would do, I don't have any questions coming in, but what I wanted to do is highlight, you know, I think Peter and Ed, they're doing it and they've got their own styles and stuff, but the framework of the 6-step sales process, both Ed and Peter are doing that. And I just want to reemphasize and tell you a couple things. One, inside the IFW portal, there is a section that has marketing resources and the scripting. A lot of the things that you heard Peter say, they're in there. The videos, we have a summary, so it's all there. And again, it's not designed to make us all robots, but it is designed to give you like a little flow, especially early on. It's a flow. And there's some key things that are in the 6-step sales process that I hope you're all going to drive home. And the first one is that building the relationship of trust. Without trust, I don't think you're going to ever get any business. If somebody like is feeling like they don't trust you because you're not doing certain things, it's going to be very hard to convert them to a client. So Ed said it really well. You know, I've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. If you feel like you're not listening, if you feel like you're talking too much, that's a problem. So the step 1 of connect is all about listening, asking those open-ended questions, and finding the things that are pain points or goals and aspirations of this person. So you heard Peter. I mean, he knew that this lady wanted to go scuba diving. Jack found it out in the fact finder, and he addressed it. She had he didn't talk a lot about this, but her mom, she was home taking care of her mom. And that was like a concern and a big topic of conversation that he built. So that connect and Peter said, I spent 15, 20 minutes connecting. So sometimes we rush to get to the point that we think is important, you know, the numbers and the this and the that. Just remember, step 1 is all about 15, 20 minutes of connecting, finding the things that are mattering to that person. Step 2, I think Peter did a really good job at showing how he made it a discussion. So, and he brought things up that were like, for her, he said, you know, when you were doing your 401k in the 70s and the 80s, it made a lot of sense because taxes were really high, so you were avoiding a high tax rate. So again, he used the tax chart and the sequence of returns to her advantage, not to her advantage, to her reference points. So, but those are important things. And again, he's just following the system. Step 3, just verifying. That's another opportunity, as Ed Ogden said, to really find out where there might be more or less assets, to audit the fact finder, really make sure you're precise. I think that also builds trust, everybody. When you show that you care about being accurate, I think that shows trust as well. And then the other thing in step 4 that Peter talked about what he did was he described that Monte Carlo simulation, and he made it really simple. And he talked about the casinos in Vegas. He talked about NASA. He talked about engineers, the drug the NIH, you know, all that. And the reason that that's important is because if somebody, in my opinion, if somebody looks at those numbers, sometimes people are skeptical and they might think that 67 is just nonsense, you know, or whatever. It doesn't really mean anything. But if you show and you build up the fact that this technology, this retirement score, is based on Monte Carlo simulation, which is a statistical modeling technique that takes things that are very random and makes them predictable. As a matter of fact, NASA uses it to launch spaceships. Talk about having to be precise. It's used by engineers to build bridges and tunnels. How often do you hear about bridges breaking down? This is precise math and science. And my favorite example is casinos. How often do you hear about a casino that loses on their slot machines, that loses money on their roulette table? They don't lose. That's because they use Monte Carlo simulation, the same thing that we're using for your retirement score. And my question to you is, having a D or a C, how does that make you feel? And then silence. So I think that's a really important opportunity to show them the accuracy, the precision of the technology and the score. The other thing that we missed, that's step number 5, where Peter talked about the before and after. One of the things that he told me he did, but he forgot to mention it, it's getting them to repeat back to us in a really nice way how this thing is working. I think we're all so guilty of, again, not engaging, not empathizing, not involving the client. And I was talking to an advisor today, and he was like, yeah, you know, sometimes I feel like I'm just talking so much, the client doesn't even know what the hell's going on. And then, you know, the meeting's over and they probably go away and go like, I had no idea what this guy was talking about. So very important to make sure that they understand what's going on. And the way they're going to understand what's going on is the way that you know that they get it is by having them reiterate to you what was said. And finally, Peter did it very obviously. My favorite part of step 6 is that Steve Jobs question that I always talk about, where Steve Jobs said to John Scully, he said John Scully was a CEO that was leaving Pepsi to join Steve Jobs at Apple. And to convince him, he asked a very powerful question. Steve Jobs said, "Let me ask you a question, John. Would you rather sell sugar and water or change the world?" So what Peter did, if you remember, he asked some questions at the end. So we could do nothing and you can have a 75% score, or you can make a couple of changes and have a 94% score. What do you want to do? And just silent. It's such a comfortable silence. If you are prepared for the silence, that silence is going to get them to go, yeah. And what did she say? She said, it seems like a dumb question. Yeah, duh, it is a dumb question. That's the point, right? We're making it a dumb question. If you can bring your sales process down to a point where making the decision to make the move into what you're suggesting is a stupid question, you've got it. And I think that's one of the things about the language that we use, as well as the technology and the retirement score. So I'll shut up. If anybody has any questions, feel free to let me know. I'm going to check the chat box here. Where do I find any training for going over the fact finder with the client? So Frank, Francis, there's a section, some videos that I've done that talk about some of the key things. But I'll tell you, if you just we've done the fact finder in a way that the 4 questions are the key, and they're in the fact finder. So and then there's also questions about each asset. So from what I've learned in my life, there's 2 things that are really important. Those 4 questions are really finding the pain points and the goals and aspirations. And then the second thing is when you're going through each asset, saying to them, why did you initially get that? And these are questions that are in the fact finder. What do you remember why you initially purchased it? When was the last time you reviewed it? Has anything changed since, and usually it's like, yeah, lots changed. It's getting them to realize, yeah, things have changed. I don't remember why I initially got it, and that kind of thing. So you're building up that thing. Another question, who helps you make financial decisions? But those are the questions. They're all in the fact finder. So you can watch my video on that, but ultimately it's just reading through the fact finder and just following that process and making it comfortable for you to communicate. Jack says, also a phone call and text the evening before the meeting and the text the morning of. So that's what Jack does. And Jack has a reasonably good show up rate, right? I mean, Jack, would you say it's 50%?
For roadmap reviews, it's much higher.
No,
yeah,
not
I'd say
roadmap reviews. For your initial fact finders.
Yeah, right around there.
Yeah. So it's never going to be, we're striving to get it to 60%, but it's not necessarily easy. People are funny, like it blows my mind, but it is what it is. All right, everybody. So does anybody have any additional questions, thoughts, comments?
People will show up tomorrow after what the market did today.
Oh my God, that's right. Crazy. So I hope this was helpful. We did record this, so it'll be available for those that missed it. But hope you guys enjoyed the Super Bowl. I thought it was an awesome game. And unless there's any questions, take care. And Scott Rosen's on here, and you all know that he's here to help. And we get a lot of good reviews about Scott's being available to everybody. So thank you, Scott. Thank you, Erik. You're welcome. All right. Well, we're good to go, everybody. If you need anything, you know where to find us.